Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us.
Hi, this is DeSantis, and welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. And this evening, you'll be joined by just myself and my wonderful guest here. I have Mr. Stefan Smart. Thank you so much for joining us, Stefan.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Anne. It's really lovely to be with you all. Thank you.
Yes. And so I'm going to read your bio because you really are doing amazing work. And Stefan Smart is a UK actor who had a big dream to take the greatest of all stories ever told, the Gospel of Mark, and perform it as it was originally intended, live and in one sitting. Stefan's one-man show, I Am Mark, has proven to be a stunning success all over the UK, selling out and filling up churches, cathedrals, conferences, schools, and now it is finally available in the US on global TV station CMAX. So welcome again. And it's such an honor for me to have this podcast with you. And I'm sorry that my co-host Bill is not able to join us this time around, but he will be back soon. Busy months of the summer, of course, for many of us, spending time with family. So
Sure. No worries at all, Anne. It's lovely to see you.
yes. And so why don't we start out with, if we could, the beginning of your journey in all of this, because I know that you have an amazing journey to share.
Sure, yeah. I've been a Christian, let me think now, it must be about 36 years, something like that. And from a non-church background, I fell deeply head over heels in love with the Lord. And very, very soon after that moment, I found myself thinking, I think God's calling me to communicate his love to other people. And I just didn't know what that looked like. And I tried various things and so on. I became a school teacher, and still there was this sense that was something I was meant to be doing, but I hadn't quite found that yet. And then a few years ago, I started learning Mark's Gospel as a way of reciting, or rather communicating, that amazing story which you referred to earlier. And I did it as a hobby, to be honest, Anne. I knew that as an English teacher and a drama teacher at school, I loved telling stories, and I knew that it had an amazing effect, it seemed, on my school children. And I thought that I could maybe transfer that gift to my Christian faith. And so that's why I did it. I learned Mark's Gospel because it was the most action-packed. B, it was the one which a lot of actors have used in the past, and I thought, if they can do it, maybe I can. And C, it's the shortest one, so I thought there aren't that many lines to learn. But it was really a kind of experiment. It wasn't anything more than that. But eventually, I think must be about now 5-6 years ago, I found myself coming under a real conviction that this was what God wanted me to do. This was it. And the more I did it, the more it seemed that was the case. And so the story could go on, but that really is the bare bones.
Well, it's certainly not bare bones, because there's so much more, right, than even what you just told us. But yeah, I think it's an incredible thing, because you took what you learned in your teaching life and just in your life in general, and God enlightened you to be able to do what you're doing now. And so you're really on a beautiful path of faith. And also tell us a little bit about your personal life. I know, I'm located here in the United States. You're out there in the UK. Tell us more about just your personal life, your family,
Sure.
whatever you want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm married with 3 grown-up children. My wife Susie, my 3 children, David, Peter, and Genevieve is her long name, but we call her Fee for short. And I hope they're listening, because I just say hello. And they are the loves of my life, and I really couldn't be here without them. Especially my wife Susie, who is incredibly supportive, and I love her so much. And I belong to a church here in Southampton in the UK. It's not a Roman Catholic church, but I know there are many in that church who are interested in the sorts of things that you guys get up to. Personally, I am really fascinated and so helped by Ignatian spirituality. And that's actually helped very much in these last few stages of my journey here, because recently I've retired from school teaching. And now I'm going full time with Mark mainly, but also doing some spiritual direction. And I'm finding that sense of drawing close to God in the way that Ignatius encourages us has brought me so much riches, so much in terms of understanding how God moves in an individual's life, how he cooperates, or rather how we cooperate with him. And that for me is a huge blessing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love Ignatian spirituality too, because there's such an awareness of the present moment and on a recognition of feelings, but not necessarily giving into despair or vice, right? It's more to recognize God even in those dark times.
Yeah.
And so that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So tell us what's going on right now, because here we are in summer 2021 and we're just coming off of this pandemic.
Sure. It's a very strange time, obviously, for everybody, and for an actor who thrives on live performances. I think it's particularly strange. I've been blessed because I have, at the beginning of this year, the film which you mentioned earlier, I Am Mark, with CMAX TV. It came out in January, and so I've been involved in promoting that since the beginning of the year. But even so, I haven't had the opportunities that I would have wanted to perform. Having said all of that, I found it's just been an amazing time, as I said earlier, of getting closer to God. And there's so much that's, as it were, at the point now of being birthed. Such exciting things. To give you one example, I don't know if I'm sure you've heard about a man called John Wesley in the US. No. One of the things I've found recently is I've sat and prayed, and I've prayed an awful lot because I've had more time to, I guess, is this sense that God wanted me to tour in the open air around the sites where John Wesley preached in the UK. And it felt such a weird and strange kind of suggestion. But the more I looked into it, the more I explored it, the more doors started opening. And just the other week, I was down in Cornwall in the UK, just touring a few sites to do with where Wesley was preaching. And as I went down there, even though I hadn't planned this, I met people who were in charge of those sites, who had a lot to do with the Methodist Church in those sites. And they were so encouraging and supportive and optimistic about the possibilities of reaching out in this way. So that's one thing, that some amazing opportunities have come up, which I would never have thought of by myself. And that's so exciting. And the other thing about how things are going for me at the moment is that drawing closer to God, I think, has been the joyous thing. I'm sure it's true of so many people. It's been a tough time for everybody. And I know it's been, for many, it's meant a lot of loss, but for many as well, it's meant a kind of opportunity, I guess, to renew their acquaintance with him. And he's taught me so much. So to give you an example, can I say a couple of examples?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I was in Cornwall and I was just touring one of those sites I mentioned. And I found the Lord saying to me, he said, Stefan, you know that the relationship we have together, it's a great friendship, isn't it? It's a warm, it's an intimate friendship. And I said, yes, Lord. And he said, well, that's exactly the relationship I had with Wesley. You know, it isn't any different. He was his own unique man, but you and you have the same thing. It's no different. Jesus is the same yesterday, today, forever. That was such a mind-blowing thing. And then later on in that day, I had this impression. I said to the Lord, you know why I'm doing this, don't you? I want to reach out to church people. That's really a joy and a blessing, because Mark is so rich as a gospel. It's incredibly beautiful and powerful. But my heart, Lord, is to reach out to those who don't go to church.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But this was the interesting thing. I don't know how you would feel about this if you'd heard it, but for me, it was really mind-blowing. It felt like the Lord was saying to me, Stefan, I'm not interested in the demarcation you make, the categories you can fall into. Do you know what I'm interested in? I said, no, Lord, what are you interested in? I'm interested in each and every individual soul. That's what I'm interested in. I want to engage with every single one. Wow, that's just so exciting. I just feel so enlivened by that suggestion about God's knowledge of each and every one of us and his desire to engage with us. And for whether you happen to feel you know him or not, or even know him a little bit, it's like he loves each one so powerfully. And that's really motivating me in terms of what happens next.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because really what it comes down to, although the church itself, worldwide, globally, right, is a massive group of people, but God loves each one of those people and desires the relationship with each person. So I think what you're doing is the best way to evangelize. It really is. And when I'm looking at your bio, it says that success all over the UK, selling out and filling up churches, cathedrals, conferences, and schools. Tell us about that, because now, of course, we just came off of this pandemic. We're still coming off of it. Yeah. But what was that like before?
Oh, my goodness. You know, I said earlier about how I found myself thinking, God is actually really serious about this. This is his idea. As soon as I said yes to that possibility, things started escalating rapidly. So we're talking of just about 5 years ago. And do you know what I found myself doing, first of all? I was inspired, if that's the right word, to perform this piece in Hyde Park Corner. This is the world famous Speaker's Corner in London, where loads of people come every Sunday afternoon, and they have these huge kind of gatherings of people saying what they feel. It's like freedom of speech. But the thing is, in which I didn't realize, everyone says their speech at the same time. So it's really, really noisy. And not only that, people go down there deliberately to argue. So they go and they heckle each other and they clash with each other. They don't come to blows, hopefully, but it's like a bear pit. And I found myself thinking, the Lord's saying, go there first. That's the first thing. And so with some trepidation, I went and I did my performance, and it was amazing. I can only say this. It wasn't easy. It was really hard. I forgot my words several times because of the noise. It was so distracting. But having said all of that, I found this amazing sense of God being with me in it, because in contrast to everything else that was happening, with all the heckling and all the arguing, there was this sense that no one was heckling me. No one was interrupting me. And why? Well, I put it down to two things. One, the presence of God, potentially, in the words themselves. But two, the fact that it was a story. It was so impolite to heckle a story. You can't interrupt a story. And so I held these people some of whom were quite hostile, you could see, in the palm of my hands. It was just amazing. And that's just propelled me into all sorts of things. So yes, I started doing this tour of all the speakers' corners in the UK. And then when I did that, I met people who said, hey, we've got a cathedral here. Come and do it in the cathedral, or whatever it might be. And so it just generated rapidly. until eventually I went to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe and into a secular theatre there on the Royal Mile. And that was in 2019. And then I found, although I was only there 5 days, all 5 of those shows were completely sold out. Unbelievable, Anne. I can only say, unbelievable. God must have been with me, because I could never have done any of that by myself.
Yeah, I would love to come out there and actually watch you in person there. But maybe you'll visit the United States. I don't know, because you
Well,
are doing the CMAX. We're going to talk about that too.
yeah.
The US Global TV CMAX. Please tell us more about that too.
Yeah. So in terms of visiting the United States, I'm actually already in kind of hoping I can do that and in discussions with people, because I absolutely love to. CMAX, yeah. So having done Edinburgh, it's just funny how God works. I went to a very small hamlet in the UK, just a group of about 50 people, and I did my performance there. I really enjoyed it. Little did I know that there was someone in the audience who belongs to Catholic Charismatic Renewal, who is a theologian called Rich Roberts, and he went over to the States and mentioned this to the executive producer of CMAX, Darrell Wentworth, and said, "I've just seen this guy. You should get him on CMAX." And so that's what happened. I got contacted out of the blue, it seems. And I talked to Darrell. It must be about, over a year and a half ago now. And we started talking about this idea of maybe me coming to the States and doing a performance there and having that filmed and putting it on CMAX. It didn't happen because of COVID, but we still went ahead with the film. We filmed it here in the UK. And then Darrell's now put it out on CMAX with his colleagues on CMAX TV. And so that's there. It's there. And you can rent it, you can stream it, you can subscribe to CMAX. There are all sorts of ways of doing it. I think they're going to try and make it into a downloadable thing as well soon. So yeah, it's there on CMAX TV.
Beautiful. Boy, God is really working in your life in so many ways. And he's using you to evangelize and to reach those people who, like you said, that the heart that you have to reach people who are away from faith and not really thinking too much about God or the Lord or following his will. So I just commend you for doing such incredible work for others and for the kingdom.
Thank you very much. I can't pretend it's been all easy, Anne. I want to stress that, because all the stories I've told you are very positive, obviously, and they're full of joy. But amidst all of that is difficulty as well, and struggle and loneliness. So it's not as if it's all straightforward. But now I've retired from teaching and I've had this opportunity, I would never, ever have swapped it in all the world. It's just the most amazing freedom to just do what I feel God is saying and go for it.
Well, on that note, regarding people who are kind of feeling marginalized or away from their faith, would you have any words of advice to listeners, either who are kind of feeling that sense of distance, or people who want to evangelize, and how can they take a step forward to evangelize those people?
Wow, that's a huge question. I can't pretend to be an expert in evangelism, but I can share an honest answer to that question. Firstly, for those who feel themselves on the margins, I know how that feels. Absolutely. I think for me, what we're talking about, though, isn't church so much as friendship with the Lord Jesus. I think in the end, when it all boils down to what's important, and he is more interested in having that friendship than you are with him. He is, even if you are desperate to have that friendship with him, he's more interested. He loves you so much in every aspect of your life. And he knows you in every aspect of your life. There's nothing that's beyond his understanding, nothing. So I would encourage, if anyone's listening who feels distance from God and distant from faith or the church, I would encourage them to recognize that they are loved. And that's it. That's the end of the story in so many words. That's what Mark's gospel essentially is about. God reaching out in human form to individuals in their lives. There's so many stories in that story. that I would recommend anyone to read about Jesus's interest in the individual, as well as whole communities, as well as the whole world. But his focus is as wide and as narrow as to encompass everything and everyone. And therefore, each individual is special. And he reaches out to that individual. He's gentle. He's never commanding in the sense of making people do what they don't want to do. He's always gentle, but he's always authoritative, and he's always healing. And he always does what is right and best for the individual, what is good for that person. I've never met anyone like him, and I can only say I would just commend him to everybody.
Yeah, commend him to everybody and use the word healing. I'm sure that in your ministry, you have witnessed some of that, just because you've met some people, you've watched like the reactions that they have to even what you're doing. Can you talk a little bit more about that too? What is it like for you being involved in something that God is using to bring healing to others?
Yeah, it depends what you mean by healing. I think, I haven't necessarily in those times of ministry experienced things where physical healings have happened, although that may have taken place. But I believe that God is at work, that one of his main, functions, if you like, is to heal. He's the ultimate physician. I'll tell you a story of something like that, which still blows my mind when I think about it. Being in a normal high street in the UK, Watford, near London, doing my performance, a crowd of people there. There must have been about 50 people all around in the middle of this precinct and pedestrian precinct. And I remember this very distinctly because before the performance started, I prayed. I said, Lord, it's a huge responsibility what I'm about to do. I'm taking on your personality, the personality of your son, and I'm attempting to portray it. And all I can ask for, Lord, is if in some way I can download some of your personality, please, because I don't want to do this in my own strength. I want to, in some way, reflect you. And I went out there, Anne, and I did this performance, and it must have been about very, very soon after I started, about a third of the way in, I noticed something strange happening. Every time my character, Jesus, spoke, there was this holy hush. It was like we were all caught in this bubble. And we're talking about a busy high street, but it wasn't busy in the sense of it was so quiet and peaceful. And I knew, as I looked around, I felt this incredible love. I can only explain it in this way. For the people I was looking at, it was just unconditional. Even so far as, and this went all the way on through the performance, even so far as I was a local youth coming by with his mates, and they thought this was hilarious what was going on, and they started shouting. And right in the middle of the crucifixion scene, he threw a soda bottle into the performance area. And, ordinarily that would have been really upsetting. But I found myself thinking, I completely love this individual. And this is so surprising. But what was even more surprising was that everyone else who was watching this performance were caught up in the sense of being loved, not by me, but by God. They were like, there was this sense of, I know I am being loved right now. And I found myself thinking, is this what it was like? Is this what it was really like when Jesus was on the earth? They were caught in this incredible sense of each one being important to Jesus. Unbelievable. And I guess that could be said to be healing. The recognition of that value, which we all have, in a moment, in a special moment, I believe could have, I'm sure it was life-changing for many then.
So special to hear this. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm visualizing all of this and almost wishing I was there to be able to watch this. But it's just wonderful to hear your story because it it says a lot about what and how God is using you to evangelize people. And so, like, you're right, healing it can be, people think of something like physical healing, but there's also healings of just being in the presence of God and the recognition that he does love you. He is with you. He cares for you. And your life means something. I think people need to know that too. They need to know that their lives actually do have a purpose and a meaning. I wondered if you could also talk about, we've watched a lot of unrest in the last year and a half or so in the whole world. I mean, not just the UK and the United States, but all over the place, because there's so many misunderstandings and there's so many points of discussion and points of contention between individuals and groups, whether it be related to politics, religion, or other things that separate people, right? And that's not what God wants. God wants us to come together in commonality. We can still have our beliefs and our differences and even our points of differences in terms of all of those different topics that I just mentioned. But God has a desire for us to come together in worship and in love and in doing really what's important to make the kingdom come true on earth.
Exactly.
So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, because do you see that in your ministry that it's a way to bring people together instead of all these things that we can point to and say, well, this person's a different religion or a different politic or whatever it is?
Yeah, I guess I can. I don't know if I've had enough experience to say this, that my ministry has the effect of bringing groups which may have political differences together. But what is interesting is what I do spans across the spectrum of Christian denominations. It's welcome everywhere, in the sense of it's the word of God. Everyone shares that common reverence for the Bible, in particular, in my case, with Mark's gospel. And it's not because they're doing that dutifully, because it's because they know that word of God is powerful in its own right. I could be the worst actor in the world, Anne. And just to explain, I in case this is, the audience is unaware, I don't just recite these words. I perform them as a drama. In other words, I take on all the parts of the characters myself and enact them. But the point of what I'm trying to say is I could be the worst actor of all, but the words themselves have a power and a healing property that people who hear them in faith can only acknowledge. And it's that which draws people of all I was going to say all faiths, but certainly all denominations to an understanding. This is something we have together. We hold this together. Not only that, what is this gospel all about? This gospel is all about one man, the one we call Jesus, who is both man and God. And this one person is the answer to so much of what we've just been discussing, this difference, these areas of difference between humanity. His role is to bind us all together in relationship with God. And to be able to experience this, as it were, in reality, even though it's just a portrayal, it's not like the sense Jesus isn't really appearing physically here. But nevertheless, there is something of his spirit at work in these performances, I believe. And to see his life enacted, it does bind people to remember their source, who made them, and as you said earlier, why they're here. Mm-hmm. And what God wants for us all, that sense of bringing together this world, which is so diverse, so split up. His job, his role is, his vision, his dream is to bring this world together as one under Christ. And everything's been made right. All that's wrong, which there is plenty that's wrong, to be made right. And that's what the kingdom, in my opinion, that's what, when Jesus talks about the kingdom, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's so encouraging, because it's a vision for all of us when we imagine that there is a place and that we can strive for that place while we're here, that kingdom. So even though there's still going to be suffering and difficulty on earth and challenges, is that kingdom is a oneness with him, which he desires for all of his people, all of them, not just Christians or Catholics or whoever, but for every person to be with him, and all of us together in unity. So beautiful. Thank you for sharing on that. Can you also tell us more, now, when you're in the process of your doing these performances, is there like a favorite time for you of when you get to that part of the gospel? Tell us more about that.
Wow. There's so many of them, but I think possibly the one I enjoy, for want of a better word, the most is the crucifixion scene, because it's so horrific, and it's so painful, and because it's so moving. And I know I've seen it affect people really dramatically. Not that I'm trying to do that, that's not my role, but nevertheless, the cruelty of it, the suffering that Jesus underwent, it never ceases to grab my emotions. And it feels like, every time I enter into it, it's the horror of it that kind of captivates me. And I guess most of the audience too. I guess there are plenty of other parts of it that really grab my attention too, but that's the one I think that stands out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And I think that Mark's gospel is also a great one for people to read, that if you haven't read the Bible in a while, sometimes people say that John is the one that people want to read, is John's gospel, but Mark's is shorter, and it's, as you said, it's very action packed, and it's not too hard to really decipher and understand, as I think the literary part of the John's gospel is something that you might need somebody to kind of walk beside you. But if you pick up a good Bible and even read in the commentary, you'd be able to visualize, pray with, and really understand what was happening in not too many chapters. Yeah, so absolutely. I think you picked a good one. A good one. Now I would like to mention on your bio also the different points of connection that people can make with you by going on something like social media, and also your different links and things like that. So now some of the websites I have are the CMAX TV, which they can kind of Google you there, right? CMAXTV.tv. And then you have Facebook is I am Mark 2021, if I'm correct, right? I am Mark 2021. Twitter, you are at I am Mark. And also the same thing on Instagram. Now there's a space between I and then the underline key M underline Mark with the Twitter and Instagram. And then also on I am Mark on LinkedIn. And you also have a YouTube channel there. And the YouTube channel is also in capitals, I am Mark. So you definitely want to subscribe and check out all of those. Tell us what's going on for the rest of this year. Do you have anything that's happening that you want people to know about for the rest of 2021 and even going into 2022?
Sure. I would love people to know a little bit about, I think now we're talking more about 2022, actually. I would just mention there is my website as well, which would probably be the easiest way of getting more information and contacting me. And so that's iam-mark.com, all lowercase. Okay. That's probably the best thing.
Thank you.
At the moment, things are happening fast in terms of preparation. As I say, it's not a full calendar yet by any means, but I'm hoping in July to go down to Cornwall, as I said earlier, to follow in the footsteps of John Wesley. So that'll be early July. And then in autumn to go to Bristol, doing the same thing there. And there are other possibilities, irons in the fire at this stage, performances that are being arranged, but I can't really say with any definiteness that at this stage that they can be publicized, but they're happening, I think.
All good. It's all good stuff. I could say this: if I ever get out to the UK, I would love to meet you, watch your performances, because that is one of my goals, is to visit there at some point.
That'd be great.
My daughter was there about a year and a half ago with school. She visited the UK and also a couple other places while she was there, just for, I think it was a 10-day trip. And so that was beautiful. And it gave me that desire after she came home and said, "Oh, Mom, you have to go. You have to visit."
Where would you like to go if you were to go to the UK?
I mean, definitely London, right? I mean, and then I would probably ask you where else I should visit.
Lovely places. Winchester's a lovely place, which isn't too far from where I live. Let me think. York is another one. They're both cathedral towns, but they're full of character. So I would definitely go to those. And Bristol as well, actually, also a good one.
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, you know that I'll be in touch when I visit. I definitely will be.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I manage to get to the States, I'll do the same for you as well, because
yes,
as I say, I'd love to be able to tour in the States. That's something that's in my mind as a possibility at any rate at this stage.
I hope so. Now, I'm in Philadelphia, and that's where Bill was actually originally from, this area, but Bill Snyder, my co-host, who's the founder of Patchwork Heart Ministry and streaming this for us on his YouTube channel, he's now out in Wisconsin. But we stream it from two different places, right? I'm here in Philadelphia, and it's great when we have guests like you who are from a different place, that we're coming from several different areas. So yeah, if you ever visit Philadelphia, I'll have to come. You'll have to come, and I'll give you the tour and everything like that. So
cool. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be beautiful. So we have so much more to discuss, a little bit more on the podcast here, and talk a little bit more, if you can, about your personal faith journey, because obviously there was a time in your own life that you really felt God speaking to you that, you know what, I want you to get involved in ministry. Do you remember a time that came alive for you?
I think it depends I guess that was a thought early on in my Christian life. I had a most profound kind of conversion experience, for want of a better phrase, as a 24-year-old, and found myself one day in my room as a student, wondering whether God existed, having read a couple of books about him, and then deciding, actually, I wonder if it's true, and praying. I remember praying, and I didn't know how to do it really, but I did. I just looked at the ceiling and I started talking to God. At least I thought God might exist. And I started talking to God about my day. And it was just incredible, really, because as I did that, to cut a long story short, there was a sense of God's presence there. And I, was totally surprised. I was not expecting it. I didn't even know what it was, frankly. It's a long story, but it was such a miraculous one in the sense that I felt completely and unconditionally loved for who I was. And I had by this stage in that evening, realized that my life was a bit of a mess. And I'd done some awful things, but even so, I was forgiven and I was loved. And I knew that my life had to change completely. And I started thinking, okay, what can I do? So in terms of ministry, I started searching quite quickly. And I had this experience about a month later when, for me, because I'd never been a Christian before, when a friend of mine said, how about you and I and some friends going carol singing around the houses in where we live? For me, that was just such a beautiful experience, because I started singing these songs, and they were songs I knew, obviously, but this is the first time I realized that they were true. And I realized God really did exist, and Mary really did exist, and Jesus really did exist, and he, etc. All these words became there, and I was so on fire that I thought to myself, I don't want to stop. I don't want this ever to stop. I don't want the joy that I feel now going carol singing with some friends ever to go away. And so when they went home and got tucked up in bed, I decided, no, I'm going to carry on. So I carried on singing. I know it's a bit strange, but I went to the local park and I started singing, carried on singing all the way through to 2:00 in the morning. I was so overjoyed. And then it became suddenly really, really quiet. And I found myself thinking, God's here with me. And what I thought I heard at that point is stayed with me. This was the thing that stayed with me. I want you to go into the world and I want you to communicate the love you feel with others. And I didn't know what that looked like. It's only now in this last phase of my life, I'm 60 years old now, 24 to 60. It's only now that I realized that this is what I'm doing is part of that. I'm sure I have done it in other ways, but this feels what I'm made for. So in terms of a call to ministry, it happened way back, but only now has it become real in the sense that I can say, I think this is what God meant. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I'm sure he means more than that, to be fair to him, but I'm so happy that this happened.
What a story. Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that we got to that question because that's a big one. And then it leads me to ask you this question, and it is kind of an advice for listeners because obviously you've developed your relationship with God, but I think we're always on a journey with God that we're never quite there, right? We always have to continue to walk with him. It's not like, hey, I've arrived, I'm going to heaven and all is great. I mean, we still have to continue to live that out. Do you have any advice for people listening on prayer and how they can grow closer to the Lord in their prayer life daily?
Oh, what a lovely question. Thank you for asking that. I do some work as a spiritual director and it's my obsession.
Good.
I've learned, because I come from a charismatic evangelical background where in the past, certainly, there's been a lot of emphasis on speaking your prayers. And that's fine. And lots of emphasis on saying a lot of words. But I found that actually, if one is to pray, the best thing that one can do is to follow the advice in the Bible, which is found, I think the best advice for prayer is in Psalm 46, verse 10.
Psalm 46, verse 10.
It says, be still and know that I'm God. And what I love about that verse is the word order as well as the meaning. Because what it says is, be still and then know that I'm God. That's the order. So there's something about being still, about quietening yourself, I think, that's important. Because prayer is not just me talking to God. Prayer is also me listening to God. It's a dialogue. And indeed, sometimes prayer can be just quiet. This is something I owe to my brothers and sisters in the Roman Catholic faith, that, you know, members of my faith, my Christian denomination, I think sometimes haven't really, certainly in the past, it was unfamiliar territory for them. But listening and quietness are so important, because what we're talking about here is a relationship. We're not talking about a monologue.
That's good.
And so prayer for me, and it doesn't matter how experienced or inexperienced you are, always starts with a place, if you can, of stillness. And for that to happen, there are some things you can do. Prayer isn't actually something that's you're in charge of. I think that's something that needs to be established. God is the one who is the main mover in prayer. He inspires us to pray. But there are things we can do to prepare for that. How about, as Jesus says, shutting yourself in a room away from others, finding space to be alone? How about giving adequate time? After all, if you are going to have a relationship with someone you love and a friendship with someone, you don't spend just 5 minutes with them. You give them time. You get to know them. And therefore, there is a need, I think, to set aside a reasonable amount of time to get to know God and for God to get to know you a bit, actually. So time's important. A space is important. Some people like to go out into the countryside as well because nature reminds them of God or whatever it might be, but it doesn't have to be. It can be in your own room. John Wesley's mother, Susanna, she had, I think it must have been about 13 children, but she knew this, the principle, and what she used to do is get a tablecloth, and when she wanted to pray, she put it over her head in order to get space away from her children. So you do anything you can to get space. And then when you found it, don't rush into prayer, because a lot of the time when we try to pray, it's hard and distracting because we're full of nervous tension. Actually, what we need to try and do is just calm down a bit. So just breathe. Just breathe, look around, just notice things around you. Don't rush into prayer. I used to do retreats and I used to say to people, right, before you do anything else, just have a walk and look at things, but don't pray. I forbid you to pray. And they say, but we've come on a retreat and you're telling me not to pray. And I'm saying, yeah, because unless you calm down and get present and be in the moment, you're never going to find it easy.
I agree with you. That's good advice. My goodness. Yeah, I never heard that before, but I love that. I'm going to definitely keep that in mind. Yeah.
So those are the things. And then finally, I would say, don't forget that when you pray, it's always a wise idea to be honest. God knows all about you. There's no point trying to put on a false front. So even if you're feeling the most, you're feeling you're the most messed up you've ever felt, it's probably wise in the end to try to get that out and be open. God knows what you're like. And he not only that, he's compassionate. He knows we're weak. He knows we're just flesh. And so he's able to help us in it. But unless we're honest, he's not going to be able to, in a sense. So be honest with him and remember that he wants you to pray more than you want to pray. He wants to be with you more than you want to be with him. So ask him to help you. Ask his Holy Spirit to help you.
Wow, you've really helped me. I love this holy advice, especially about calming yourself. One of the practices that I do when I pray is I look out. I have a beautiful big window that I look out, and there are some pretty trees and leaves, and it really draws me to God when I look at that scene. Even if it's the same scene every day, I love to watch the changes in seasons too. Here in Pennsylvania, of course, we've big change in seasons, and the color of the leaves and the sky and the sun and the effects of the light. And it really does draw me into prayer. And so thanks for bringing that up, because I think it is an important thing for us to get outside of our own desires, because sometimes when we pray, we all have those desires. We're praying for somebody who's sick. We're praying for somebody who lost their job. We're praying for our own needs and our family. And so we get kind of focused on those things that are going on. But when we kind of get outside of that a little bit and just notice what's happening around us in nature, and I think that's an important thing. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. No, and we have about 5 or 10 minutes left of the podcast. How about the spiritual direction? Because there might be somebody listening who is interested in spiritual direction with you. Does it have to be in person, or do you do it online? Because certainly you've got people over here in the United States that might be listening and thinking, he sounds like he'd be great.
I do it on Zoom as well. Yeah. So by all means, if you went to my website, www.iam-mark.com, there's a contact form. If you wanted to contact me there through that would be one way of doing it. I'd be certainly open to discussion.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Good to know. And I'll keep it in mind as well for people that I know might be interested.
Thank you.
And so before we end, then is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners about either what's going on or about your ministry? Anything at all, please do use this time as a way to connect with our listeners.
Yeah, I think I would say that I mean, now we've started talking about prayer. As I said earlier, it's a personal kind of thing of mine, a hobby horse, if you like. But yeah, I just want to build on what you said about desires a bit, actually. I think you're right. We can get caught up in our own thinking, and that's probably hugely difficult for us, in terms of understanding where God is in everything. But there's nothing wrong with saying to God honestly too about what we want. I mean, as you know, with Ignatian spirituality, about that, asking for what you want is actually quite important. So that would be one thing. I'm trying to think, actually, what else is there to say? Pretty much said everything I can, actually.
No, yeah. It's a long podcast, so it gives you that opportunity to cover all the different areas. I just wanted to make sure that I also asked the right questions, because personally speaking, I think that your ministry and you are an incredible person of faith. And Bill and I would love to have you back again. And I know that he had a desire to be here with us today, and unfortunately wasn't able to come along this time. But it doesn't mean that next time he won't be here for another podcast with us, with Sowing Hope Podcast. Yeah. And just a couple other calls to action for people who are listening is to please do check out on patchworkheart.org that we have a brand new book called Hearts Burning Within Us. This is a book specifically geared to college age students and their questions of faith. And so that book is newly available. All you need to do is go to patchworkheart.org, check it out. And thank you so much for doing that. And so again, Stefan, thank you for joining us on the Sowing Hope podcast.
It's been a real pleasure. And thank you so much. It's been lovely to meet you again. And great to hear Bill's voice earlier as well. So thank you so much for inviting me.
God bless. We will see you next time, Stefan. And to everyone else, join us again for the next episode of the Sowing Hope podcast. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel at Patchwork Heart Ministry on YouTube. God bless. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and DeSantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or Andy Santis 2.